Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. My name is Claire Ladd, and I'm the Programs and Services Manager at the Massachusetts Nonprofit Network, or MNN. Thanks so much for joining today. Just a few quick housekeeping items before we get into the content. So the recording of the webinar, as well as the slides, will be shared with you following the webinar, so just keep an eye on your email for that. If you have any questions for the presenters during the webinar, you can submit them via the chat or the Q&A function at any time, and there will be time at the end for questions. If you have any technical difficulties or anything like that, you can also reach out to us via the chat. I also want to give us a little bit of background about us here at MNN. Our three goals are to strengthen the nonprofit sector through advocacy, public awareness, and capacity building services. We offer regular webinars in partnership with our affiliate members as part of these capacity building efforts, and please stay tuned for future topics and let us know if there's anything you'd like to see. Our efforts are made possible by our more than 600 member organizations, so thanks to all of you who are members. And if you have not yet joined the network but would like to take advantage of the networking opportunities, trainings, and cost savings, please visit massnonprofitnet.org/join to find out more. Okay, so for today's webinar, it's titled AI Adoption for Nonprofits and presented by Ryan Knight of Insource Services. So I'll hand it over to presenters to get us started.
Thanks, Claire. So I'm Ryan Knight. I lead the data and AI practice at Insource. So Insource is a professional services firm. We help our mission-driven clients to focus on what they do best by providing world-class back office services in HR, finance, data, and AI. We're based in Massachusetts, and we take a people-first approach to our services. So AI, the AI hype train has left the station. There could not be more hype about the state of AI right now, especially by the big companies, Microsoft included, that really want us all to be using AI for everything. But seeing through that hype to find the actually useful use cases is a bit like finding a diamond in the rough here. So how do we actually use AI in a practical way? I think that we can all agree that potential is there, but where is it practically applicable? So I'd like to start with feelings here, and I kind of track this along with what different feelings have I had over the years that I don't have anymore? So who here remembers what it feels like to be lost? You've got the map, maybe the map question directions printed out, and you miss the turn, and now you're like somewhere, and you're not sure where you are, and you don't know how to get from wherever it is that you are to where you're going. And that's a very particular feeling. And it's not a feeling that I have anymore. I just don't feel lost anymore with, my Google Maps and my phone. Even if my phone battery dies, I can ask somebody else who's got an equally good system right next to them, So through technology, we sort of lost this feeling of being lost. That's not a feeling that we have anymore. And I think with AI, it's going to change some of the feelings that we have about work. So in particular, do you ever procrastinate on a task because you don't know where to start? Who has done that or is doing that right now as they're watching this webinar? And that really is a feeling that you don't need to have anymore. That is what AI is really good at. It's really good at getting started at things where you don't know where to start. And that is my go-to of I should be using AI right now, is when I have that feeling of oh man, I'm supposed to have made a job description for an intern to come and help us with internal data analysis projects. And I haven't done that. I'm not sure what the job description should say. I'm not sure what the resources should be. That's when I turn to AI. It's when I realize that I'm not starting something because I don't know where to start. I have that kind of fear of blank page or that fear of getting started on something. So I might have had that feeling about this presentation. And I might have generated an outline using AI for this presentation. And I didn't end up using the outline, but it got me started and it got my juices flowing and it gave me enough of a boost to know where I actually did want to go with it. Oh, this isn't quite right. But what would be right is this other thing. So as I think about what AI is really useful for, it's really changed that feeling of procrastinating because I don't know where to start. I need to tackle that feeling using AI. So, when should you use AI? So there's been some emerging research already, some studies done where they randomly assign employees to have access to more AI or more powerful AI or training in how to use AI. And then they look at the productivity of the employees as they go through that process. And that has happened, both with low skill tasks and with high skill tasks. So even fancy BCG employees getting access to AI and that kind of thing. And what those studies show, it is still early in the research, but what they show is that people with the least experience in a task benefit the most. So it kind of brings up the floor of accessibility and what we can tackle as a team. It really helps us to see, you know, like if you don't have experience in something, you can get to a pretty good job of it with AI. So if you are thinking about using AI with like the task that you do all the time that you're super expert in, and you're looking at the responses that are coming back, you might notice real gaps in that. But if you're looking at it with something where, I'm not an HR expert, my job is not to generate job descriptions, so it can generate a pretty good job description for me. It can make that task much more accessible to me. So to summarize that, use AI when you don't have the expertise, when you don't know where to start, or when you need to just, get something for another expert to build on. So, for example, we've noticed that our lawyers' time is more efficient when we give our lawyers something to review and approve versus something to draft for themselves. So if I want to, you know, introduce a new clause or something like that, I might use AI to get started on that and then hand it off to the person whose time I'm trying to optimize for them. And they're going to notice where the gaps are in it, and they're going to either, throw it out if it's terrible or improve it if it works well enough. But we can use AI to, build efficiency for people whose time is very valuable. So what is AI bad at? So if you want it to be bad at something, it will be. So good prompting is required to get AI to be good at something, and you have to be persistent. You have to persist on a task and try different ways of interacting with AI and try different ways of getting to the result. If you're like kind of go into it with the attitude of like, I don't think AI can do this, or you like secretly don't want AI to be able to do it, you'll generate prompts that will, you won't persist in iterating your prompt enough to get to a good result, and it will be bad at it. Another thing that AI is not yet good at is analyzing data. So things like the Microsoft Excel integrations, or just drop a data set into ChatGPT. Um, you know, the line that I use here is LLMs are the result of machine learning. They don't do machine learning. So an LLM, a large language model like a ChatGPT, et cetera, is not going to execute a machine learning algorithm on your data in order to learn from your data in particular and then spot trends in your data and monitor streams in your data. That's, I think, an area where the hype has gotten ahead of the capabilities at this point right now. AI can do pretty good SQL generation to like, write some queries that can be useful, but it's not going to learn from your data. These are general purpose models that learn from training on like the internet. Your data is very small in comparison. So the analyzing the data is an area where I'm looking forward to improvements in AI in the future. The other thing that AI is bad at is really telling you what it's bad at. So AI like really wants to be helpful. It is very keen to be helpful to you. And it will try to be helpful even when it's just making stuff up. The word that we use for this in AI is hallucinating. So it will hallucinate a response very frequently when it doesn't know the answer. Some AIs are better than others about that. But that's an area where we need to get more humble AIs in the future. I hope that AIs have more humility in the future. So in particular, if you're pairing someone who has low expertise in a task with a task that is kind of outside of the capability of AI, that's where you can run into trouble with the human who's working with the AI not having the content expertise to notice when the AI is making something up or hallucinating. So we try to keep our tasks, within the purview of this text-based environment, and with some back checking of people who do have more expertise in that area. So I'm going to go over now a few concerns that people often have about using AI, especially for nonprofits. So privacy is the first concern. And this is an area where I think that there's a lot of confusion right now among AI users. Um, so a lot of people will say, like, you can't use AI with confidential data. And it's a little bit more nuanced than that. Oftentimes, you can't use a free version of a tool with confidential data, but there are ways to pay for privacy. So a trend in the market seems to be that, you know, the more expensive subscriptions or the enterprise subscriptions buy you the privacy. They buy you the confidence that you can use it with your confidential data. There's even ways to set up a BAA with some of these. If you have patient health information, if you have PII, you can set up subscriptions with AI-based tools that will allow you to use AI in a particular way with that confidential data, and it won't be retained. It won't go into their training. It won't become public. But if you're just like, let me open up Google and type in AI chat and go to the first one there, that's not going to be confidential. And even when you're paying for a subscription, there are certain tools that I'll go over later that are more secure versus other. The other major privacy concern is AI startups. So there's like the generalized tools like a ChatGPT or a Claude with Anthropic that like anybody can use and go to. And then there's like a million AI startups right now. It's a boom phase. And in any boom phase like this, there's going to be people who are bad actors. There's going to be people who are taking advantage of how easy it is to say, call yourself an AI startup. And so it's both a very exciting time with the capabilities that the startups will be able to offer, but it's also a time when you need to be really careful about ensuring that you have agreements with those startups that they will handle your confidential information well. So you don't know what tools they're using within your interaction with them. Are they passing it on to a third party? Is that third party also following the same standards? So particularly, I want to call out the tools that will join your Zoom meeting for you and take notes. Those are tools that have access to very confidential information. Oftentimes, you could be talking about anything within a meeting, and you don't know what tools those tools are using. And some of them use kind of predatory tactics to join meetings that they should not be invited to. Like they're just showing up in all kinds of meetings. So that's something that in particular, I'm glad to see more AI-based features worked into the core products like Zoom or Meets or Teams to where you don't have to use a third-party tool for that, because that's one of the ones that sort of raises my heckles in terms of, is this really protecting the privacy of the data that it's working with? And then the last privacy concern is that we really recommend that any organization that's thinking about AI adoption adopt a governance policy internally that will give your employees the guardrails, the bumper rails for what AI can and should be used for. So, things in that like don't just sign up for a random AI tool and give it all of your confidential data. Instead, this is the approval process that we will go through to vet tools and make sure that it's protecting our privacy. Let's maintain a list of tools that are approved for different use cases, and let's guide people towards those vetted and approved tools. That's something that you can do both from a CYA perspective, but also from an impact perspective to be able to help your folks access the right tools for the right job. Another common concern that people bring up with me about AI is bias. And look, LLMs are trained on the internet, and the internet is biased. So there is bias in the LLMs. You can just ask it, generate an image of a productive business person. And these are the four images that it generated for me. And you could tell it kind of has a type. Like this business guy here is like he's like a little bit similar to that business guy that I showed earlier. I don't know why AI thinks that there's like this one Ashton Kutchery looking dude who you should like generate all of your images based off of. But there is bias in AI, and that is something that you need to be aware of. So you need to be responsible for the quality of your work. So anytime that you're using an LLM, it should be as a first draft, not a final draft, and you need to monitor the results for bias. I think that the confusion that I can see with bias is that I see often with bias is that there are also ways that AI can be deployed to reduce bias in our work. So while AI can and will introduce bias in certain ways, it can and should reduce bias in other ways. So you can use AI to evaluate, things that have all the PII removed from them. So there's no possibility of bias in that way. And then, that can level the playing field. So for example, you could imagine in the future, AI being part of your recruiting process to generate, some kind of screen in your recruiting process. Maybe it's evaluating resumes or something like that. And you could remove the names from the resumes so that the AI has no information about the candidate apart from what's in their resume, something like that. The other thing is that I think a difference between someone who's just getting started with AI and someone who's using AI a lot is that if you're using AI a lot, you learn that these are not just one model, that often it's like a series of models that are connecting to each other. And you start thinking about your own work as a series of models that I'm going to connect to each other and deploy for a particular purpose. And then you could start using AIs to evaluate the bias in your process. So AIs are actually pretty good at spotting bias. If you ask AI to review your job description for potential bias or something like that, it'll give you like useful and actionable feedback from that. So there are ways that we can slot AI into our processes and ask it to evaluate the process for bias and reduce the bias in the process itself. So I think that there are ways where we need to be monitoring for bias, in new ways because we're using a new tool that does have bias. And then there are also ways that we should deploy this new tool to reduce bias in our work. I want to go over some of the common tools that you may have heard of and talk a little bit about how you might use them, given some of these concerns. So you probably heard of ChatGPT. GPT-4 is still the leading model. And with ChatGPT, you do need an enterprise subscription to make data private. So the default setting with ChatGPT is that the data would be used for training, and there are sometimes ways to extract training data through indirections. So that's one in particular where you want to make sure that you've got the enterprise subscription enabled so that you can make your chats private. Microsoft Copilot. So Microsoft already has all of your data, and they've slotted Copilot under the same terms of service. So according to those terms of service, they're not training on your data. And they're even using GPT-4 in some of their modes. So if you're enabling creative mode with Microsoft Copilot, which I always recommend, I don't know why it's called creative instead of just better mode. It's generally better. That is not going to be used for training. So that is one that is more safe to use with your data. The challenge with Microsoft Copilot is that they're kind of throwing all these features at a wall, generate a PowerPoint with Copilot, summarize my emails with Copilot. And it's better at some of those than it is at others. It's much better at summarizing an email than generating a PowerPoint. So when we work with companies to introduce Copilot, we're always trying to focus in on like, what are the particular use cases that you want to introduce within your organization? Because it can be sometimes hard to keep track at what Copilot is good at versus not good at. Anthropic Claude is another model like ChatGPT. And it has a lot of strengths to go with it. It is one of the more humble AIs. It will sort of admit its own shortcomings more readily and therefore hallucinate a little bit less. It's very good with long documents. It has a very long context window. It's very focused on AI safety, and it has the advantage of chats are private unless you use the feedback tool to explicitly grant permission to use your chats. So sort of the by default privacy is the highest with Claude. And then the landscape is always evolving. We now have Google Gemini introduced. And so Google Gemini has the least favorable privacy protections out of any of these. So even when you have a subscription, it will still use your data, to improve their products. So that's the one to be the most careful about with confidential data. I'm excited about how Google is going to deploy Gemini across their stack, but it's a little bit early stage to see, really what are going to be the killer use cases on the Gemini side. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about prompting. So you probably heard about prompting. Prompting is the way, the instructions that we give to an LLM. So I could do a whole hour on prompting, so I'm not going to, go too deep on it, just an initial overview. A couple of things to remember with prompting is that if you remind an LLM that they're an expert at something, that they're good at it, then they will be better at it. So if you start with, you are an expert HR manager, then it will generate a better job description than if you just say, generate a job description. Sometimes AI will tell you that it can't do something that it can do. And if you just insist, no, you can do this, you are capable, then it will start doing it. So sometimes AIs need to be reminded of what they're capable of. So you can also make it an iterative process. A prompt is not just like a one and done thing where you do one prompt and you get one response. You can iterate on what the LLM generated. So if you want more cowbell, tell it more cowbell, and it will give you more cowbell. And then if you want even more cowbell, you'll eventually get to Will Ferrell level cowbell. And so what I often do with the feedback is, if I'm giving it feedback 2 or 3 times on something and it's still not getting what I want, I'll just start a completely new chat and restart from the beginning because something about the way that I did my prompt originally wasn't very good. But I'll often ask it to redo what it just did, only with more of this or with less of that. Another thing that I use is sort of this idea that I was talking about before of like, it's not going to be one model, it's going to be a chain of models eventually. So I will use LLM output as a prompt in another chat. So I'll say, generate a project plan for adopting a new expense software for a nonprofit. And then it will generate the project plan. I'll give it more details than that. And then I'll copy and paste the project plan into a new chat and say, what is wrong with this plan? How could I make it better? And then it will improve the plan itself. So you can kind of have these LLMs like talk to each other in a way to make their results better. Sometimes they can drift from the intended purpose when you do that, but it is also a very good technique and a very good use case. In general, I'm very excited about the role of LLMs to give feedback and to do coaching. And I think that that's a good application of that. So where do we go from here? We talked about the AI adoption journey a little bit, from, when should you use AI? What tools are available? How do you use it in a private way? And now I'll talk a little bit about some places that you can go that are sort of the next level of implementation on this. So I'm really excited about moving past chat as an interface for AI. I think ChatGPT was so successful that a lot of us think about chat when we think about AI. But there's also a lot that AI enables us to do beyond chat. So here's one example. So we're working with a foster care agency to do parent capacity evaluations. So when a child is placed into temporary guardianship, a parent capacity evaluation is done, and that determines what supports the parents would need to retain their right of guardianship. These reports are supposed to be made in 45 days, But they actually take them 4 to 5 months. During that time, the children are in temporary care. And so anything that we could do to speed that process up is really good. And part of the reason that it takes so long is because the social workers who are doing the reports, they want to be social workers. They don't want to sit down and write 35 pages of process documentation about, I interviewed this person and they said that. So what we did is we built them an app that allows them to upload interview recordings of the interviews that they do for the parent capacity evaluation. And then we use AI. We combine the recordings with these guidelines and some good prompting in order to generate a first draft of the required documentation. So those 35 pages of I interviewed this person is now coming from the AI. And we built the tool in 8 weeks, start to finish. It's launched now and live. And I have to say, this is one of those projects where I was like, yeah, this is going to work, I think, but it is working even better than we expected. So in the 3 months before we launched this tool, the organization that we're partnered with did one parent capacity evaluation. And in the 3 weeks since we've launched it, they've done, I believe they're up to 5 now. So it really speeded up the process quite a lot. And because their social workers are paid hourly, it's going to save them lots of money because the amount of time that is required to do these parent capacity evaluations is so much less. And I think that this is a um, kind of a particular case of a generalizable phenomenon that all of us have a way of operating within our organization. And there are ways that AI could speed up that process quite a lot. And so I'm really excited about the potential to build customized solutions for organizations like this that, leverage the very specific things that are unique to your use case, um, to partner with AI to speed that up. So another example of this, let me see if I have another, yeah. Another example of this is um, we're working with an organization that helps facilitate low-income families to get childcare vouchers. And that's a process that requires a lot of documentation. You need to prove your residency. You need to prove your income threshold. You need to prove your identity. And so we're building a case management system for them as well that will allow parents to interact with this system directly. And then we'll use AI to process the documents for them to speed up that document processing step. And because there's so many different ways that parents can enter into the system, and there's so many different reasons that they could qualify for subsidized childcare, we're also using AI to help identify, where in the process families should be, just by asking them, why are you, why should you get subsidized childcare? And then they're able to answer, and we're able to route them to the expert in that reason. So if they answer, oh, I just, entered into a shelter for the first time, and I'm in a new area, and now that I'm in the shelter, I need to find childcare. Then we can set them up with an expert on working with um, housing insecure families, and we can speed up that process that way. So I'm really excited about the potential to build, case management or operations management platforms that are really accessing things that a year or 2 years ago would not have been possible, but today are possible. Another kind of good to great application of AI is to build your own automation with agents. So you may have heard of agents or GPTs, and basically they're no-code flows that allow you to put together, like I was saying, those like components of models and assemble them in an order. So an example of this is, using the GPTs that OpenAI provides is they have a built-in integration with Salesforce. So you can, use APIs without needing to code. You may have heard of APIs as a way of transferring data around. And usually you have to be able to code to figure out the API, but you could just drop the API documentation into these GPTs and it can figure it out. And so you could say something like, when a new opportunity is assigned to my user in Salesforce, go to the opportunities website, refer to our standard pitch materials that I can provide you, then generate a custom pitch that's tailored to this organization. So the possibilities here are like infinite. It's really configurable. It's a really well implemented tool. And so the idea of making these automations more accessible to people without requiring their own coding skills is something that I'm really excited about the potential for. So the other thing that I think in the good to great space with AI you could think about doing is building a menu of use cases for AI for your organization. So you may have heard of a tool called MagicSchool.ai, and MagicSchool.ai is probably the most popular AI tool in education right now, in education technology. And all that Magic School AI is instead of going to ChatGPT where you land on a blank screen, it gives you a bunch of things that you might want to do with AI if you're a teacher. So you might want to generate multiple choice questions for a text, or you might want to change the difficulty of a text. And so it gives you just like a dozen of these different options that you can choose from instead of being faced with a blank screen. And I think that that just makes it a lot more accessible for teachers who could be overwhelmed by, the blank screen of a chat. Like, how should I use this? I don't know what this is capable of. I don't know what I should use this for. Instead, they're choosing from a menu of use cases, and that lowers the bar to entry a lot. So I think a little bit of AI chat is like going to the grocery store. It's like, yeah, I could make any meal based on what's in the grocery store, but I am not a good cook. I only know how to make a few things. So if I go to a grocery store, even though I could, in theory, make any meal based on what's in the grocery store, I'm probably just going to make what I know. Versus if I go to a restaurant, I can get all kinds of things that I couldn't make myself because, they've done the thinking about here's what's going to be on the menu. And so I'm excited about organizations developing their own menus of use cases with AI. So you may want to have a launching point somewhere in your organization that is like, generate job description with AI, if that's what you're into on recruiting. But if you're using a more particular use case, like the childcare voucher one, like generate an email to a family that confirms their pay stub amounts or something like that might be something that's on your menu that might be more unique to your organization. And so I think giving people a place to start um, with their AI is going to be something that can help make this more accessible to more people and lower that barrier to entry. So I wanted to open it up for questions here about and to you all about what you hope to get out of AI, sort of enter the question answer phase of it. I see one question in the chat, PAI. I think I probably said PII. So personally identifiable information. That's information that, requires particular care and may have certain regulations about how you manage it.
And Ryan, if it's okay, I have two examples to things you've spoken about that I could share.
Absolutely. So this is Russell Greenwald. He's also works with me at Insource. He leads um, our technology practice, our technology arm.
We have two questions in the chat. I would love to create a GPT that can help with grant writing.
Yeah, that's absolutely a use case that you could use. In and there's different solutions to different ways of interacting with AI. And so what I might think about if I wanted to build a GPT to help with grant writing is I would give it access to previous grants that I had already written in order to understand, kind of the boilerplate, kind of the ways that our organization does grants, along with some information about our company. And then you could do it iteratively, even through chat. Or if there's like particular places that the grants are posted that you wanted it to like monitor and look for those opportunities and draft to those, then you could do that with the GPTs as well. But that's certainly a very achievable use case that really falls under that example I was talking about of things that you might procrastinate because you don't know where to get started. I would definitely put that under that category.
And the next question, and I think this goes to the example with the parent evaluation. Uh, any suggestions on how to find integrations for certain use cases? For example, I work with underserved college students to gain entry into financial services industry, and we'd like to send them a platform, not just a GPT, that helps them tailor resumes, create resumes, cover letters, and job search tools. And that feels like what the parent evaluation app is. In that model, for this example of trying to write better resumes or create resumes, you can train your customized AI based on how, like, what you think are really good resumes. So if you have a batch of 10 or 100 really, really good resumes in the format that the financial service industries want, you can train your AI to say, output these quality things, and then give your students prompts to fill out, like maybe fields in an app just to fill out name, experience, education, other things, and then that will generate the resume based on your inputs.
Yeah, I really like that use case. That's kind of like giving a menu to the people that you're working with about how they should use your tool. And so if I were to build a tool like that, I'd probably look at, are there low code solutions that we could use to set up an interface for people to interact with where they've got, drop your resume here, and then it generates the feedback on the resume, or type your work experience, type your most recent work experience, and then it generates a resume if they don't have a resume to start. And so there are tools um, within the Microsoft ecosystem like Power Apps that allow you to do that in a low code way that's pretty accessible. And then there's, lots of other tools that would be applicable to that as well, like a retool, et cetera. But that could be something that you could do without having to spin up your own, your own servers and your own website and that kind of thing.
This is such a, I won't answer this. I'll let you answer this one. Implementing AI workflows is exciting. Oh, how feasible is this for organizations to do on their own, or would they recommend outside consultants?
Um, I think that the exciting thing about AI is that it lets people with less experience do a lot more. So uh, if you have people on your team who want to learn about this and want to get into it, you can. So for example, we worked with a client where somebody really wanted to build a user interface for something, and the client just taught herself how to do it using AI to like give her feedback and generate things for her in a week. She's someone who's very technical and was very dedicated and had an entire week to do nothing else but spend time on this. So I do think that there is more possibility to do this type of work internally than there has been in the past. That said, if you work with someone who's an outside consultant, we'll be able to do things like make sure that your security is is fully up to snuff, that you're not introducing any security vulnerabilities as part of doing this. We'll be able to, really take a user-centered design approach to it and bring some of that product management expertise to what we're doing. And then we've also just seen a lot of these different use cases from a lot of different people. So we have some efficiency to being able to do that from that we gain from that, but also some perspective on new ideas that you might not have thought about internally. So I'd say my answer to that is, you know, um, just get started if you want to get started. Don't let anything get in your way of getting started. But if and when you're ready to invest in a tool that you think has potential to have real impact on your organization, folks like us are really excited and can do a lot to make that process something that's secure and reliable and high quality.
Which is interesting because one of the questions in here, is there a place where we could find tools already in place? Is there a best way to find those integrations, or do they not exist yet and we have to create internally?
Oh, the GPT integrations? Yeah, there's like a GPT store on OpenAI. So you could Google GPT store and get to that. So there's a lot of people who have built those integrations already. Um, and if you're already using a tool like Zapier, it's kind of very similar to a Zapier type of experience in terms of how you would build them. And even Zapier itself is doing a good job of integrating AI. So yeah, you might be able to find a use case for your needs in the GPT store. Um, I will note that, GPTs account for a very small portion of OpenAI's overall traffic. So there aren't like hugely successful GPT examples right now that I could point you to of like within the GPT store, this is the one to use. You would still kind of be trying out which GPTs you wanted to be using there. And again, I would encourage you to just get started and give it a try if you're interested in it. You know, the benefit of AI is that you can do a lot more than you thought you could. So give it a try and see how far you get.
And maybe just for a quick share, Ryan, could you stop sharing for a second? I'll just give 2 examples. So for those that have like Microsoft Copilot, is this you seeing this, the PowerPoint? So like this is Microsoft PowerPoint online, and Copilot is integrated now into Microsoft. You have to pay a fee for it. I can't remember what the nonprofit pricing is for Copilot, but your IT person can purchase 1, 2, 3, however many licenses to start playing with it. They integrate it into their product suite across all their tools. And like, for example, I typed in, give me a 4-page presentation with images on what to do in Boston in the spring, keep each page to 4 bullets and make it so it's no more than 10 minutes. And it tried to generate a full PowerPoint with images, titles, and even put notes, speaking notes into it and how to do it. So it's really, you have to start thinking of what can it do and how can it do it, because it can do images as well. And you can keep tweaking on tools like this, saying, give me 5 bullets per slide, make it 10 pages. You know what, make it more professional. I want to make it so a children can understand it better. One of my favorite uses of GPT that I did with my kids, because there's an ChatGPT has one you can talk to on your phone and it talks back. I asked it to explain the American Revolution in the style of Bob Ross, which was phenomenal. And it did a really good job of explaining how the American Revolution happened in the style of Bob Ross. You could probably ask it to explain it in the style of Taylor Swift, and it would do that as well. So you really do start thinking about what can it do, how can I play? One of the things we did at Insource to play with it, we use DISC at Insource in terms of, it's not personality, but work styles. Are you a D, I, S, or C? We took all the data from all of our staff's discs and we put it into an AI. So I could say, I'm meeting with Ryan to go over a presentation. How best should I collaborate? And this AI is trying to look at the disc personality profile of like Ryan and myself, and it's going to spit out a response of, this is the best way to work with Ryan, how to do it. We had one of our engineers build this using their knowledge how to do it. So we were just, and we actually ended up internally deciding this is not a good use case for AI. Our HR person said, don't use AI to shortcut what is important human interaction, which was a really good discussion internally of AI shouldn't shortcut how you work with people. But it really allowed us to keep thinking of, because we're always playing, how best to do something using AI. Back to some questions. Let's see. For AI recordings of interviews, is it necessary to receive permission to record from the interviewee? I think this is not a decision we make for you. If you should be recording an interviewee, I think that is a internal legal discussion. I know with Zoom, when you enable recording, there's a big prompt. I think Teams has the same prompt, and different recording apps, you can probably make it so the other person has to accept before it starts, or it just starts and it notifies different things. And there's transcription recording, and then there is video recording, and they both have actually very different implications in terms of legal use case. Claire, this one's for you. Someone would love a follow-up webinar into like best practices around prompting, which we'd be happy to do. Ryan, one of the questions here is a glossary of terms.
Yeah, I can edit the presentation to add a glossary of terms so that we can share that out with folks who want to after the webinar. Happy to answer any questions about particular terms that I used as well. I see a question about where to find which AI note takers are safe to use. I would recommend using the ones that are built into the product that you're using so that you're not introducing a new dependency in your workflow and exposing yourself to another to another tool. So for example, with a Copilot subscription, you can use Teams to generate notes. Zoom has a notes feature as well. And so if you are going to use a third-party one, I would look for one that has information about how to get a BAA on their website. So something that has been used in clinical settings in the past as ones that will at least know, if they have that option, they'll at least know about zero data retention and the requirements that you would have to follow in order to be approved for the highest levels of security that you would want around patient health information. I see one more question. Is the social work interview process and documentation app available for purchase? That's it's the client's app. It's owned by them. So I would be happy to make an introduction to you to them if you want to use their exact one. We're certainly happy to, and actually very excited about developing similar tools for similar adjacent use cases. Because I think that that's an area in particular where we can introduce a lot of efficiency and improve quality using AI. One other thing about that process that I didn't mention earlier is that each of the interviews has a guide that their social workers are supposed to follow for the interview. So in addition to generating the first draft of the summary, we are also asking the AI to give feedback on the interview itself by using the guide. And that provides a new feedback loop, a new way to improve the quality of the actual interviews that are happening. Because social work is a relatively high turnover position and there are always onboarding new people to that role, being able to use the AI, not just to summarize, but also to improve the quality is very helpful. Interesting that you haven't found the AI companion. So this question is around the Zoom AI companion being less reliable, being not that reliable. I personally haven't played with the Zoom AI companion as much as I have with the Teams one. So I can take as a next step for myself to try that Zoom AI companion more to understand its strengths and weaknesses better. I will say the Teams one I found actually quite good in most cases. In some cases, it's totally off. But in general, I'm probably at like a 75% success rate in asking it to generate meeting notes and then just pasting the meeting notes into, wherever we're keeping our documentation in order to have a record of what was discussed.
And the other thing you can do is you can turn on transcription and then later on paste the transcriptions into an AI and say, summarize this meeting, give me key points. That way you're not having Zoom do it. You're just taking the pure transcription and doing it from there.
That's another great use case that I worked with a local cable access station in Massachusetts on, where they had these vast transcripts of these interviews that they conducted. And so, they had the recordings, so we returned the recordings into transcripts, then we put the transcripts into Claude, one of the AI tools, and asked it to generate a story, keeping the timestamps involved. And then that turned the whole recording into a tight story that they were able to use to edit down to those particular timestamps on it. And then we asked it to generate a narration to go along with it. And then we used an AI voice feature to generate the voiceover. And so it took the whole process of editing down these interviews it would have taken them 3 days, and they did it in about 3 hours using that. So definitely recommend leveraging the transcripts as well in unique and interesting ways.
So everyone will get a copy of the presentation that we'll send. Our contact info is in it. This is a topic we love. If you have any more interest, please feel free to reach out.
And in case you're wondering, yes, everyone at Insource does wear blue sweaters. It is a requirement.
Yeah, if there's no more questions, thank you to everyone for attending today. This was really, really informative. And so especially huge thank you to Ryan and Russell for presenting this webinar. And just again, yes, as mentioned, I will be sending out the recording and the slides, as well as the contact info of the presenters. So just look for that in a follow-up email in the next couple of days, most likely. And yeah, have a great rest of your day and week, everyone. Thanks so much.
Cool. Thank you.